To discuss the impact and rise in anti-Asian bias attacks, I'm joined now by actress Olivia Munn, actor Dae Kim, AAPI Stop the Hate co-founder Russell Jeung, Rise founder and CEO Amanda Nguyen, and chef Melissa King. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. We're coming together at a really difficult time, but I want to talk about back in March of 2020, because that's when an FBI report warned of an increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans as the coronavirus spread. And Russell, I know your organization, Stop AAPI Hate, has been a place where people have turned to report hate incidents. What do the data show? Where are these incidents happening, and who's being targeted?
Thanks. Well, since March last year, when we started our website tracker, we've received almost 3,800 incidents from Asian Americans about the incidents of hate that they've been experiencing, and they've been horrific. People have had slurs slung at them. They've had racial profanities. They've been pushed and shoved. We've received reports from all 50 states now. So it's widespread, it's commonplace, and I think it's led to an atmosphere of fear and anxiety within the community.
Amanda, you posted this video on social media in early February drawing attention to recent attacks, particularly against Asian American elders. Why did you create that video?
Quite simply, I didn't see our stories getting represented in the mainstream media, and I wanted people to understand what was happening in our community. I think that when that video was posted, it was like fire meets gasoline, because not only did people feel like their grief was being brought to light and that they could be validated in how they were feeling, but also other communities said, oh, that is a clear call to action, and that's something that I want to help with. And I'm so grateful to everyone who has stepped up to speak up about this issue.
Olivia, you have used your platform to speak out about anti-Asian hate. How do you think Hollywood has shaped perceptions of Asians and Asian Americans, and particularly Asian American women? And are things changing at all, do you think?
I think that we're all well aware of the fetishization of Asian women in Hollywood and in media. And, for so long, white people have been able to tell our stories. And as all minorities, we're just allowed to support them in telling those stories. So it's really through their eyes and through their opinions of us. It's slowly changing. And, the people on this call, we're all part of that change and that movement.
Melissa, as someone in the culinary world who's enjoyed much success, what have things been like for you and your family? Because you were telling me that, being in California, you're accustomed to seeing other Asians, Asian Americans, but this feels different to you, that in 2021, you have a real fear for your parents who immigrated to this country from Hong Kong and China.
It's just been very upsetting, things that are happening within the restaurant industry itself, with vandalism of restaurants, a drop in just patronage of Asian restaurants. So it's really become personal for me. And that's where, I do fear for people of like my parents' age who are elderly, and, I fear for their safety. I fear for them walking down the street at night and what's going to happen.
There is this concept of the model minority stereotype. And, Daniel, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that and how that tends to diminish the racial experiences of people within this very diverse group known as the AAPI community.
Sure, it's a great question because, the AAPI community is not a monolith. As we all know, there are many countries that make up Asia, and none of them are the same. So we have been lucky that many of us have been successful because of the brain drain that happened in the mid-'60s, bringing over professionals and then people in the science and medical fields. But we've also had refugees and immigrants coming from Southeast Asia. And so the disparity between the highest earning Asians and the lowest is the largest of any ethnic group in the country. And so it does a great disservice to those of us when we need services from the government and our community to not be able to ask or to be considered okay by them because they see doctors and lawyers and CEOs, and so we're considered to be fine.
So what Daniel said about the model minority stereotype, thinking we're white adjacent, that's been part of the issue. But there's another stereotype that's really been stoking the racism. You know, like 2 years ago, we were crazy, rich Asians and beloved. But in times of war, in times of pandemic, in times of economic downturn, we're pushed out from being insiders to America to being outsiders of America.
Amanda, I want to turn to you because Russell used a word that I think some people will not be familiar with, this idea of being white adjacent. What are the implications of that?
When people consistently erase our humanity, right? When they say, oh, you know, are they people of color? Are they white adjacent? All of this comes from systemic oppression and systemic erasure of us. Yellow fever, you know, Olivia talking about how Hollywood has had tropes of sexualization, fetishizing the AAPI female body. All of this really stems from lack of education and lack of empathy.
Can you give us a sense, Olivia, of what it's like to be an Asian American woman in Hollywood?
Typically, as an Asian American, as an Asian American woman, the roles are to be the submissive wife, or to be the out of control wife, and perpetuating the stereotype that we are either submissive or crazy. And, you know, for me, it has meant that I don't work as much as I would want to, because, you know, in order to work, I'd have to take a lot more of those offers. It takes a long time of just saying no to a lot of stuff and hoping that that will dry out one river so that another river can come through.
What's interesting is back to kind of what Olivia was saying, was within her industry, it's the white man telling the story of us. And within the restaurant world, it's the same thing. You know, this has been happening for a long time where, you know, people have come here from Asia and we're not allowed to create our food. We have to create sort of this Americanized version of our food. And now with what's happening today with the pandemic as a whole, that's completely wiped out the restaurant industry. But on top of that, I've been seeing and hearing of personal friends in New York that have restaurants where they have to close down their operating hours early in order to ensure the safety of their staff. And so it's not just these isolated incidences, it's everywhere happening.
You know, there's so much to unpack here. In our final minutes, I just want to go around and ask people, what is it that people who are allies or want to be allies can do to help? What would you say to those people?
We're Orientalized. We're often seen from other people's point of view. We don't have our own narratives being told. And so I would tell our allies, hear our stories. Hear how we want to be portrayed. Hear how we are human, how we're grieving now over the shootings of our community.
Olivia, what would you say to people who want to help or learn more?
I would say that right now, people speaking up on social media is such a huge source of strength for a lot of us, because we have gone for so long feeling invisible and unseen, and that these attacks on our community are not important enough for people to clog up their timeline. And so just having that, and especially other people in our community, but in other communities and other minority communities speaking up, that has meant so much.
Daniel?
Not everyone will understand the Asian American experience in the same way that we'll never understand the African American experience, but it doesn't mean we can't seek to understand. And I think that is really important, because in order for a movement like this to grow, it requires all of us.
Amanda, I'll give you the last word. How can people help?
I think that some people may want to be allies but are afraid of saying the wrong thing, or they just don't know how. So let me just encourage people to reach out to the Asian American Pacific Islanders within your life, and reach out to not only those who are speaking up, but also to those who may be afraid to.
So well said. This is a conversation that will continue. Olivia Munn, Dae Kim, Russell Jeung, Amanda Nguyen, and Melissa King. This has meant so much to be able to have this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you all so very much.